Hello friends, welcome into NFL Daily. I am your host, Tom Downey. Now, as promised, we'll take a look at 5 more players who could be traded in the NFL, and of course, these are some bigger name players because no one cares when a team's third-string linebacker gets dealt. That means most of these guys probably aren't going to be traded, but if they do, it'd certainly be a blockbuster, of course. I said the same thing about Odell Beckham, and we know what happened there. So we'll start things off with Jadeveon Clowney, the Texans linebacker, edge, or whatever you want to call him there. The reports have been the Texans are open to trading away Clowney, and of course the asking price is likely at least what Frank Clark got in the Seahawks-Chiefs trade. Now, Clowney and the Texans aren't close on a long-term deal, and they might choose to go with the, let's just franchise tag him for a year and then revisit it. Now, Clowney has not hit 10 sacks in his NFL career, but he's been pretty damn close the past 2 seasons, 9 and 9.5, with really good tackle for loss production as well. So, for Houston, a team that is trying to win games right now, my biggest issue with any possible trade is I don't know how they replace Clowney. Yeah, I don't think it works. There isn't enough depth at the edge spot. Yes, J.J. Watt is a 3-4 defensive end who plays plenty of pass rushing snaps because he's so damn good at it. But for Houston, you're going to be in a rough spot. Now, if they decide, you know what, we're going to lose Clowney, we're going to trade him no matter what, here are 5 teams I think you should watch out for. The Jets, the Bucks have little money, especially after signing Sue, but man, he'd be a great fit on that edge. Detroit would be a fun fit as well. I'll always include the Oakland Raiders for an edge rusher. I know they took Cleveland Ferrell. Why not have a trio of Ferrell, Clowney, and Arden Key? That's pretty fun, right? But the team I think makes the most sense are the Buffalo Bills. Yes, they just re-signed Jerry Hughes. He's old. They have Trent Murphy. He might be better as a number 3. Shaq Lawson, unfortunately, looks like a bust. So for the Bills, I think that'd be a great fit there. If Houston actually dealt him, I am very confident Buffalo would be at the forefront there. A passing down unit of Ed Oliver, Jerry Hughes, Clowney, and whoever else you want. You could kick one of them inside, bring Murphy in. You could put one of the Phillipses there. That's a really good pass rush. Now, I'll go back to Oakland here as well. Yes, they drafted Cleveland Ferrell, who I think will be a good player for them. Yes, they have Arden Key, who I think needs some more development, obviously. Max Crosby's still very raw. If the Raiders want to say, screw it, we have the money, we found a way to pay the escrow stuff for his new contract, because, of course, if you trade for Clowney, you're going to give him a big, fat new contract. Be fun, right? Arden Key on the edge, Ferrell on the edge, Clowney could be inside, Ferrell could be inside. They both have some good length there, along with Mil Hurst on all these passing downs. That's a fun pass rush unit there if you're the Oakland Raiders. Here's my proposed trade. So, again, it's very similar to the Frank Clark trade. I'll say a first-round pick, a second-round pick, maybe drops down to a third if, like, Houston misses the playoffs. And I'll throw in Shaq Lawson, too, because, look, Houston needs somebody else out there at the edge rush spot. Yeah, Lawson's nowhere near as good as Clowney and is never going to be, but it gives them at least another body there. So what do you guys think in terms of Clowney's trade value? Let me know in the comments section. I think it's about the Frank Clark value, a first, second, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, somewhere in that range. I think sounds about right for Clowney. Let's move now to Duke Johnson, who, as I'm sure you all know, has already requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. That was back in early April. He was not happy about the signing of Kareem Hunt. He really hasn't been utilized as frequently as he can be utilized in the NFL. The issue, of course, for Cleveland is, A, they know Duke Johnson's pretty darn good. They don't want to give him away for nothing. And they saw that Jordan Howard went for very little. That's a big red flag there. And for the Browns, yes, they signed Kareem Hunt. They don't have him for the first half of the year. That leaves Nick Chubb, Hunt, Johnson, and a bunch of dudes you've probably never heard of. So if you're Cleveland, you probably don't want to just give away Duke Johnson right now. You didn't draft one. Maybe it makes more sense to hang on for Duke for one more year and then revisit. But if they do trade him away, here's what I think the value would be. I think it's about a 5th-round pick. Maybe that's too high after what Jordan Howard went for. And every NFL team has at least one back because there are so many of them. I was trying to find a team that didn't have a great number 2. How about the Jacksonville Jaguars? Duke Johnson, by the way, because he's almost a slot receiver at times, can play on the field with Fournette as well. So who says no? Type B for Browns, J for the Jags. I think it's the Browns that end up saying no because I don't think they want to trade Duke Johnson. But when a player requests a trade, we're going to put him on this list. So for the Jags, meanwhile, yes, they signed Alfred Blue and Thomas Rawls and Benny Cunningham, and they drafted Raquel Armstead, who, frankly, right now, especially maybe a little bit less so Armstead, but Blue and Rawls and Cunningham, those guys are Jags. They're just a guy. They are nothing special, but you bring in Duke Johnson, that brings you a little bit more dynamic ability in the passing. Now, his rushing numbers have not been great, and you're wondering, wait a minute, why would I want to trade for a running back who's never topped 400 yards on the ground? Because he's almost a slot receiver. That's what Duke Johnson really is these days, and his production through the air has actually been pretty darn good. Obviously, fewer receptions this past year, but great production anyway. Duke Johnson brings you that true third down back ability. The Jags, I don't think, really have that right now. You can play him in the slot, of course, too. So for Jacksonville, if the Browns say, yeah, we're going to trade Duke Johnson, and they already have made friends with the Carlos Hyde trade, too, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's move then to defense again here. How about Leonard Williams? Now, I almost didn't put him on here because I don't know if the Jets are actually going to do it unless they get a really high pick, and I don't know if that's going to happen. But it does make some sense from a roster-building perspective. Leonard Williams is no doubt a great player. I think we can all agree on that. But he's entering the last year of his contract, and the Jets just drafted another high defensive lineman early, and they re-signed Henry Anderson. They drafted Nathan Shepard in the 3rd round last year. They took Quinn in number 3 this year. McClendon, Steve can play nose guard. And if you're the Jets here, and if you decide, yes, we're going to pay Leonard Williams the, $15 million per year it's going to cost them, whatever that number ends up being, it's going to be expensive, by the way. So for the Jets, you kind of have a tough time finding playing time for Leonard and Quinn and Henry and Shepard and Fuller if you ever want to use him and McClendon in their defensive scheme. So maybe you do trade him. Maybe it's a mid-season trade if you don't work out a long-term deal and you're already out of the playoff race. One thing that makes a lot of sense to me, that is the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I'll make this a conditional 2nd-round pick. I'll throw in the condition there that it's the higher of their two. They have their own pick and the Redskins pick. That could very well be a top 40 selection. So who says no, the Colts or the Jets? Again, I think I lean towards the Jets right now, but if they're not close to a deal, it does make more sense to trade them away and get more for a team that is probably not going to be a Super Bowl contender this season. Now for the Colts, they're fine on the defensive line. They don't have a crying need because they've invested so much, but if there is one, it's probably on the interior. Now I like Danico Autry. Marcus Hunt's a fine player. Grover Stewart is a good number 3 nose guard backup type. But if you could bring in Leonard Williams, well now all of a sudden, this front looks a little scary, especially if a Tyquan Lewis develops and he's got some DT flex. If Demoko Toure develops, or Ben Banigou, or Muhammad, whatever. That's a dangerous front. So if you're the Colts already playing with house money, and I know what you're saying already, the Colts' MO is to build through the draft. Maybe they'll make an exception for Leonard Williams, go all in, get that premier interior defensive lineman, and make that Super Bowl push. You have two, you're playing with house money, but I know it's not always the Chris Ballard MO. Let's move to the offensive line now. How about La'el Collins? I don't think the Cowboys will keep Collins after this season. He has his contract is up. They drafted another offensive guard this season. I think that means Collins hits free agency. Williams kicks over to right tackle. Connor Williams kicks over to right tackle and leaves Collins as the odd man out in what is becoming a very quickly contract-heavy offseason for this year and next year for the Dallas Cowboys. He does carry an almost $10 million cap hit, but Collins has trade value. And you could trade Collins away, put Williams at right tackle, McGovern at left guard. You're fine on the interior because you still have Xavier Su'a-Filo. All of a sudden, you feel pretty good about your overall offensive line still for the Dallas Cowboys. And I'll make note, La'el Collins is not a superstar right tackle, but I think he's at least average, probably bordering on above average. Guess what is lacking in the NFL? Average offensive line play. There are a lot of teams out there that would be desperate for a player like La'el Collins. The Jets could use him. The Bengals, look, Bobby Hart's garbage. The Seattle Seahawks, Romain Ifedi's not getting the job done. Houston and Miami have needs everywhere over the offensive line. So we'll start with Miami here. Now, the one big thing that's an issue here is that they are rebuilding. They probably don't want to trade away picks. At the same time, they need to see if Josh Rosen is the guy. And this offensive line is not going to be conducive for that. I like Tunsil. Dieter has promise there. Daniel Kilgore is meh. Jesse Davis is not good. Jordan Mills is better than what they had, but he's better as a swing tackle. So, yes, if you're any team, you're going to have to trade a premium pick, let's say a 3rd or a 4th rounder for Collins, and then pay him big money. But for Miami, you do want to protect your A, investment in Josh Rosen, or B, your next quarterback, and they get an early start on that. Houston, meanwhile, and I know what you're saying, Tom, they drafted Titus Howard, and they drafted Max Sharping. Remember, La'el Collins isn't just a tackle. He can also play guard. So maybe you kick him inside. Dolphins could do the exact same thing, by the way, and help your offense out. Because my biggest fear for Houston this season is that the offensive line looks like this, or God forbid, Matt Khalil starts, or something like that. And either way, it's not a good offensive line. And yes, Deshaun Watson can run. There is an injury history with Deshaun Watson, and if he goes down, season over. So if I'm Houston with cap space to spare, maybe you do throw that draft pick and solidify at least one of your starting spots with, frankly, a player who might be your best offensive lineman instantly if you're the Houston Texans. That's not good. Seattle, meanwhile, they keep trying to make Jermaine Ifedi happen, and it's just not going to happen. Now, he's been better since Tom Cable's gone because Tom Cable is terrible, but I just don't think Ifedi's it. Maybe he can be a swing tackle. Bring in La'el Collins, make him your right tackle, much like the Texans scenario. If Russell Wilson goes down, season's over. Now, he's been really healthy, but it is always at the back of my mind that, oh no, what happens if this is the year he finally gets hurt? Let's move to cornerback now. Chris Harris Jr., who, much like Kyle Rudolph in our last video, very obvious extension talks going on there. But Harris wants $15 million per year. It might be a short-term deal, but that's quite a bit of money. And if the Broncos don't get a long-term deal with Harris worked out, they might just trade him. Now, I think an extension would be more likely than a trade. Maybe the opposite is true for Kyle Rudolph there. But it does make some sense there for the Denver Broncos. Now, Harris obviously is the Broncos' #1 cornerback. There is really no doubt about that one. And Kareem Jackson can also play free safety. He might be a safety there in general with maybe it's Simmons and Jackson instead. Maybe one play strong safety, whatever. But if you trade Harris, maybe you just keep Jackson there. You bring up Isaac Yiadom, and he is your #2 corner. Now, look, if Denver's trying to win this year, you probably want Chris Harris. But John Elway does have a little bit more, I think, compared to most GMs, long-term job security. So maybe they do try and trade with Chris Harris. I wouldn't do it, but if they do, here are some teams to watch out for. Pittsburgh could still use some help. Carolina definitely could. I like Seattle, not their typical fit, but it's Chris Harris, right? The Rams are my dark horse. We'll get back to them in a minute. But first, the Detroit Lions. And they did bring in Rashawn Melvin. They drafted Amani Oruwariye out of Penn State. They signed Marcus Cooper. Cooper's bad. I love Tease Tabor coming out. I swung and missed. He has been terrible. So all of a sudden, Darius Slay, Chris Harris, that's a really good 1-2 punch. Justin Coleman, the nickel. The one issue, Darius Slay wants a new contract. You just paid Justin Coleman. Can you invest like $40 million in 3 corners if you're the Detroit Lions? That's a lot of money. I kind of like the idea, but it's a lot of money to invest. The Rams, meanwhile, dark horse. You think, oh, they've got Marcus Peters and Nakeem Talib and Nikhil Roby-Coleman. They don't need a new corner. The dirty little secret about LA last year, Peters and Talib actually didn't play that well. Neither was as good as they should have been. You could trade one away. Bring in Chris Harris, who of course played under Wade Phillips. Just a thought there. I know it's a dark horse option, but I wanted to make note of it. Seattle, meanwhile, I like Griffin. I can get by with Trey Flowers, I guess. And then it's a bunch of gigantic question marks at cornerback. Is it Akeem King? Does Delano Hill play some of the nickel? Does Ugo Amadi win that job? Jamar Taylor? It's not a great fit there. So you bring in Chris Harris, who can also play nickel in 3 cornerback looks. I like it. I was kind of surprised Seattle didn't invest more in the cornerback spot this draft process. All right, so those were 5 other players to watch out for, but let me know in the comments section. What NFL player do you want to see traded? It can be either A, a player you want traded away from your team, or B, a player you want your team to trade for. Let me know in the comments section, and I'll see if I can't throw together a quick little trade package for you guys down there in the comments.